You feel everything. The shift in someone's voice, the pause that lingers too long, the emotion behind words that were never spoken. But when it comes time to talk about how you feel, your throat tightens and the moment passes. Not because there's nothing inside you, but because explaining it feels harder than carrying it quietly. So you smile, you say you're fine, and you keep moving while everything stays with you. You've always been deeply aware of people, of moods, of emotional undercurrents others seem to miss. You notice when someone isn't really okay, even if they're laughing. You sense when something is off, long before it's said out loud. And because you notice so much, you've learned to hold a lot. You replay conversations in your mind, wondering what you should have said or what you shouldn't have felt. You feel things immediately, fully, sometimes intensely, but you process them privately. When something hurts, you don't rush to talk about it. You tell yourself it's not a big deal, that others have it worse, that it'll pass. And most of the time, it does, at least on the surface. You might be the one people describe as strong, emotionally mature, or easy to talk to. You listen more than you speak. You validate others without expecting the same in return. You rarely interrupt. You rarely ask for space. You rarely say, "This affected me." Not because you don't feel deeply, but because you've learned to keep your feelings contained, controlled, and quiet. From the outside, you seem calm, grounded, unbothered. Inside, there's a steady stream of thoughts, emotions, memories, and reactions, all happening at once. And no one sees how much energy it takes just to keep everything inside you balanced. For many people, this way of being didn't appear overnight. It developed slowly, through experience, repetition, and adaptation. Often, it begins in environments where emotional expression didn't feel safe, useful, or welcome. Maybe when you spoke up, you were misunderstood. Maybe your emotions were minimized or brushed aside. Maybe you noticed that expressing yourself caused tension, conflict, or distance, so you adjusted. You learned that being observant was safer than being expressive, that listening was safer than speaking, that understanding others mattered more than being understood. Over time, you became very good at reading emotional cues. You learned to sense what others needed before they asked. You learned to manage your reactions internally without showing them outwardly. Sometimes, this pattern forms because you genuinely care about harmony. You don't want to burden people with your feelings. You don't want to make situations heavier than they already are. You don't want to be too much. And sometimes, it forms because you had to grow emotionally independent early, even if no one ever said that out loud. You learn to self-regulate, to self-soothe, to process alone, not because you preferred it, but because it worked. This wasn't weakness, it was adaptation. You didn't stop feeling, you just learned how to survive with those feelings quietly. At first, this way of being can look like emotional strength. You don't react impulsively, you don't create drama, you don't fall apart publicly. But over time, the cost becomes noticeable, internally. You may start to feel emotionally tired in ways you can't explain. Not burned out from doing too much, but worn down from holding too much. You might feel lonely, even when surrounded by people who care about you, because being with others doesn't always mean being seen. You may struggle to articulate what's wrong, because nothing feels specific enough. There's no single event, no clear reason, just a quiet heaviness that follows you. Sometimes the feelings you don't express don't disappear. They settle deeper. They show up as mental noise, as emotional numbness, as a sense of detachment from your own needs. You might notice that you second-guess your emotions before you even acknowledge them. You might feel disconnected from your body, unsure whether you're tired, sad, overwhelmed, or simply empty. And perhaps the most painful part is this. People often assume you're okay because you always seem okay. You've been so consistent in holding yourself together that no one questions it. No one checks in deeply. No one realizes how much you've been carrying alone. So the silence continues, not because you don't want connection, but because you've learned to function without being emotionally held. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling deeply and speaking quietly. Many people who feel everything but say nothing are emotionally perceptive in ways that rarely get acknowledged. You don't just feel, you process, you reflect, you notice patterns, shifts, emotional truth beneath the surface. Your silence isn't emptiness, it's fullness with no clear place to go. What you've been doing isn't emotional avoidance, it's emotional containment, a skill that allowed you to stay grounded, to stay functional, to protect yourself. You learned to be steady because steadiness was required of you. You learned to be composed because chaos wasn't an option. You learned to carry yourself because no one taught you how to set the weight down. And that deserves recognition, not judgment. You are not broken for holding things quietly. You are not too sensitive for feeling deeply. And you are not weak for wishing someone would notice without you having to explain. Your inner world is rich, complex, and valid, even if you've kept it private for a long time. If this feels familiar, let this be a gentle reminder. You are not invisible, even if you've learned to stay quiet. You are not a burden, even if you've learned to carry yourself alone. And you are not alone in this experience, even when it feels deeply personal. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to justify your feelings. And you don't need to become louder to be worthy of understanding. Sometimes simply recognizing what you've been carrying is enough for now. And your feelings don't lose their meaning just because you've learned how to hold them in silence.